Hi, today we're going to be studying Tehillim Kuf Lamed Aleph Le'iloi Nishma Sara Rivka Bat Harav Nacham Umindal. Although I never had the privilege of meeting Sarah, it's been so moving to watch these shiurim, learn about what a remarkable person she was, and also sense the quality of the Torah learning that has flourished in her memory. It's an honor to be taking part in this project. Perek Kuf Lamed Aleph is quite short. It's only 3 psukim long, and it's made up of several seemingly simple, although perhaps upon further analysis, slightly more complicated statements. The Misharer explains to God that his heart is not haughty, and he does not expect very much. Lo gavali bi velo ramu einai, that he has calmed and quieted his soul. Shiviti v'domamti nafshi, and in doing that, he's like a weaned child, gamul alei imo, who no longer desires the milk of his mother. On a surface level, this perek seems to be an anomaly amid the dramatic spiritual expressions we see in Tehillim. In direct contrast to the previous perek, Perek Kuf Lamed, where we hear the speaker cry, Mimama Kim Karaticha Hashem, from the depths I have called to you, God. The speaker in Kuf Lamed Aleph is saying, Lo halachti b'gdolot u'b'neflaot mimeni. I don't exercise myself in things too great or in things too wonderful for me. And yet, while the stance here in Kuf Lamed Aleph does seem to be one of humble resignation, I believe that there may be more going on between these lines, and it's something that the Rishonim, which I'll get to in a few minutes, are sensitive to as well. In a famous essay comparing biblical and Greek prose, Eric Auerbach talks about the suggestive influence of the unexpressed that he sees as characterizing biblical prose. That is, there are parts of Tanakh where the meaning comes not in what is explicitly said, but in what is unspoken. Auerbach describes certain places in the Torah that are fraught with background, where some larger story seems to be weighing on the words, but that story remains mysterious or obscure. To me, Tehillim Kuf Lamed Aleph is one of those places, where its meaning is best understood through what is unsaid rather than what is explicitly written. In the first pasuk, the Misharer describes what he's feeling by way of negation. That is, he tells us what he's not feeling. Shir hamalot leDavid, Adonai lo gavali bi, velo ramu einai, velo halachti b'gdolot u'b'neflaot mimeni. There's a bit of a paradox in the opening lines, in that this is a Shir Hamalot, a song of ascents. The Mishnah connects the 15 Shir Hamalot psalms to the 15 steps that led to the Beit HaMikdash. Some see the Shirei Hamalot as describing the ascent toward Yerushalayim during the Shalosh Regalim, or perhaps as a statement of a general yearning for Yerushalayim from a state of Galut. There are actually some interesting possibilities for formalistic readings of the Shirei Hamalot that I learned about in Stu Halpern's shir several prekim ago. Regardless, I think in many of the Shirei Hamalot, the movement does seem to be an upward one, bringing us closer to God and to Tzion. And yet, the Misharer here in Kuf Lamed Aleph seems to be proud of the very opposite. Lo ramu einai, my eyes have not looked upward, and lo halachti b'gdolot u'b'neflaot mimeni, I have not gone in a direction that is too great or too ambitious. According to Radak's interpretation of this perek, this is the attitude that we want to cultivate within Galut, looking downward instead of upward, recognizing our lowly state. Once again, I think there's a tension here between the said and the unsaid. The Misharer, on the surface, articulates a strategy of how to navigate Galut, through humility and not expecting too much. Indeed, the very act of offering a strategy in this way embraces a compromised posture. The upward yearning implied by the term Shir Hamalot is thus transformed into a downward gaze. And yet, as the perek continues, the speaker's unspoken dissatisfaction with the condition of Galut remains in the background, yet increasingly detectable. The second pasuk only heightens this tension. It employs the unusual formulation of Im lo shiviti v'domamti nafshi kegamul alei imo kegamul alai nafshi. JPS translates this as, Surely I have stilled and quieted my soul, like a weaned child with his mother. My soul is with me like a weaned child. It seems counterintuitive to talk about your soul, presumably in relation to God, as being like a weaned child who no longer needs the milk of his mother. We'd expect the very opposite. We would expect that the Mishorer seeks and desires God like a nursing child needs his mother. And indeed, Rashi takes this approach, reinterpreting these words to refer to a suckling child who is still in the throes of a nursing relationship. While Rashi does not seem to be interpreting these words literally, I think he's addressing the heart of the tension that underlies them. On the surface, the Mishorer seems to have resigned himself to a certain independence from God, in the fact that he does not want too much, that he is satisfied with the little he has and will not push for more. But Rashi sees beneath those words a longing for the very opposite. When the poet says, Lo gava libi, v'lo ramu einai, I don't need much, my heart is satisfied with the little I have, I think we also hear a subtle longing for something else, for a kind of aliyah, for ascendance, or transcendence. The foreground of this Perek articulates a strategy of how to resign ourselves to the circumstances of our lives. This sets into relief a yearning for something greater, which remains unspoken in the Perek's background. Returning to Radak's interpretation, I think this defines the experience of Galut more generally. It's possible to grow accustomed to, even treasure, a state that was originally designed as a punishment. That is, we work hard to cultivate an acceptance of our condition. And yet when we declare out loud, we're happy with this state of affairs, we don't need to be closer to God, we're happy with the miserable lot we have, it's hard to not read through those lines and see some kind of yearning. The Mishorer knows very well that to say, surely I have stilled and quieted my soul, is to also say the opposite. That is, a soul is not something that can be stilled and quieted, not permanently, and a declaration of complacency also necessarily carries with it a subtle implication that greater heights are still desirable and maybe even possible. Galut is the foreground against which the possibility of Geula rests in perpetual relief. Yachal Yisrael el Adonai, me'atav yad olam.